5 years. 5 years rotting in Brooklyn. Concrete, sirens, millions of bodies packed into a grid, breathing the same exhaust. I didn't write music there. I didn't create much. I just festered. That's my dog running around, by the way, that sound you hear. It wasn't just the loudness of the noise. It was heavy. It crawled under my skin, constant media. I guess it was just this lack of any single private square inch. I had no privacy. And it strangled the art right out of me. He's eating one of the bones I found. You can hear him cracking. I had to come back to my family's land in Appalachia. I needed a complete separation, a hard reset. So I spent 3.5 years out here off the grid, alone, letting the dirt back under my nails. My entire perception of life has changed. My body has too. You think you get writer's block in the city. You think you're just stressed. You're not. You're just biologically defending yourself. When you exist in a hyper-stimulating environment, subways, digital screens, a million overlapping voices, your brain can not physically process that big of a data load. If it tried, your nervous system would probably short-circuit. Cognitive collapse. So it adapts. It forces a state of homeostasis. It actively alters your neurological pathways. It builds a biological wall to filter out all that noise. But the wall it builds doesn't discriminate. It blocks the sirens, sure, but it also mutes your sensory receptors. It dulls the raw animistic inputs that you need to feel or cast anything that really works. I was completely deadened by civilization. Coming back to my family's land, it wasn't a vacation. I needed a complete break from society and from every human. It was like a breaking down of dead tissue so I could regenerate. Out here, the sirens stop. The screens go black. And slowly, even sometimes painfully, those receptors start to wake back up. You start hearing the exact ratio of the wind hitting the pines. You're no longer protected by the sound of outside, by walls in your house. 6 months in, after I'd first started camping out there, no dog yet, just me in a nylon tent on family land that hadn't seen a human footprint in decades. We have a lot of land and most of it isn't used. It's been really wild for a long time. No forest rangers. It's not like a national park where things are controlled a little better. The wildlife wasn't accustomed to me in a tent. It wasn't even late that night. My lantern was still on. I was a glowing alien dome in pitch black. Then a vibration. I didn't hear it first. I felt it. The ground moving under a big weight. Then a growl. Low, bassy, guttural. I wouldn't even call it a noise. I would call it a feeling. I could feel it in my bones. He was right outside this thin nylon that separated us. A big bear, confused by the light. One swipe, one curious motion with a claw, and my face comes off. It might not be the most perfect face in the world, but I'm rather fond of my face. I'd like to keep it. If I'd been in the city, my nervous system would have misfired. I would have spiked my cortisol. I probably would have screamed and sent pheromones of fear all through the tent. That massive chemical release that signals prey. But out there, My biology had already started to heal. I'd been out there for a while and I wasn't numb anymore. I was calibrated to the environment. So I shut down, complete automatic override. Lantern off, breathing stopped. I instinctively slowed down my own heart rate. I suppressed the adrenaline pump. I stopped sweating out chemicals that made me smell like a target. I actively altered my biological signature in the dark. I became the dirt. He sniffed the heavy air, found nothing interesting, left. You don't get that level of physiological control when your brain is fighting off a million notifications a minute. You won't get that instinct if you're living inside a concrete box. People hear that I went off to live in the woods for a couple of years and they make assumptions. They think I became a vegan sitting on a stump somewhere playing a cracked acoustic guitar. I'm nowhere near that person. My studio runs on a mix of electronics, controllers, my voice, and a couple of percussive instruments, fader banks, keyboards. I build orchestration. I play with sound design and special effects. And that does not contradict the reset for me. It does involve a screen and a hard drive, but that electricity is just as raw to me as fire and gravity. Electromagnetism is one of the 4 fundamental forces of nature. We've learned how to pull elementary nature into music, how to shape lightning into frequencies. It's alchemy. My voice, electrical charges firing across my brain. Bioelectricity. My reset in nature wasn't about abandoning technology. It was about clearing the rot out of my head so I could feel the current again, shedding like a snake. And I still do that every once in a while. The night the bear walked away, I realized something. Control. If my nervous system could physically alter the air in that tent, if I could drop my heart rate, suppress my own biological signature, and change the reality of a predator 3 feet away, what could my voice do? You are an instrument. You don't just consume frequencies. You broadcast those frequencies. And just like I had to regulate my own heartbeat, I realized I had to regulate what I was putting out into the world on a regular basis. People think spells are fantasy, witches and oracles. That's a myth. Spells are just intentional repetition. When you loop a lyric, when you chant a phrase over and over again in a chorus, you're physically vibrating the air. You're making it so. Today, we just call it neuroplasticity. The brain physically rewires itself based on repeated stimuli. Neurons that fire together wire together. In a busy place where your receptors are dulled, it's easy to start constantly chanting garbage. You unconsciously absorb the noise and the panic, and you rewire your brain to accept the sickness. You basically cast spells against yourself. When you force yourself out of that learned noise and away from too much human and civil stimulation, it changes the way you perceive. It changes your whole biology. My music shifted. I started dragging in darker elements and ancient ethnic rhythms. The world usually wants the purely positive, this acoustic illusion of nature. The world doesn't understand the woods. Nature isn't always a sweet, sunny meadow. Nature is the bear. It's predator and prey. It's violent, unavoidable death. And it forces you to change your perceptions and your actions. I don't think you can be truly spiritual by ignoring the dark. I think that's just hiding. Real spirituality is incorporating the rot. My music and my art uses what's heavy and dark, and it uses lessons I've learned out in the wild. Everything I write is influenced by those messages. Messages from animals and storms and everything that I experienced being alone under the black sky. I write music, stories, lyrics to replicate what it actually feels like to be alive, not the cleaned up version of alive. Light and dark, science and spirit. Your biology is listening to everything that you say. The earth is listening to everything that you broadcast. So, what spell are you casting?